And welcome to The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers. We're here each and every week talking to interesting people and discussing topical issues. And this one is very much at the center of this state's attention. We're going to talk about immigration and specifically House Bill 1804 1 year later. And where's it headed?
Yes, I think there's a lot of uncertainty about the scope of 1804, what it does, what it doesn't do, and what kind of requirements it puts on the state, local leaders to enforce various provisions of 1804. We'll see what kind of impact it's had on some of our citizens as well, some of our employers. We're going to have an expert join us on that topic who does nothing but immigration law and is very familiar with 1804. I think it'll be an interesting show.
We look forward to it. We're discussing immigration, the legal effects of House Bill 1804, and what changes might be in the offing. It's all coming up today on The Verdict.
Driving rain, blistering heat, and bitter cold. 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. Chesapeake drills non-stop for natural gas on American soil. Chesapeake drills more new gas wells than anyone else, and from those wells collects the most drilling information and acquires more 3D seismic images, leveraging every efficiency to improve the odds of finding more natural gas every day with every well we drill. The better job we do of discovering bigger reserves of clean-burning American natural gas, the greater the prosperity of our nearby communities, our state, and our nation. And as long as there are more gas reserves to be found here in the U.S., we will never rest. Chesapeake. Natural gas wins the day.
Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett and Kent Myers. Our guest today is Jasmine Majid, and Kent's going to tell us a little bit more about her.
We're really pleased to have Jasmine Majid with us. She's with me at Crowe Dunlevy. She is a director there and has been for some time. She did her undergraduate work at Oklahoma State University, did some master's work at Drexel University in Philadelphia, and then got her law degree at Temple University in Philadelphia. She's the former executive director of the Pennsylvania Immigration Resource Center. She's the former director of the Georgia Refugee Program. She engages in the practice of immigration law. She's taken a good bit of time to study House Bill 1804, which we passed last year. Been in effect a while now. She's here to talk to us about that. Welcome. We're sure glad to have you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
And the two of you are both from the law firm of Crowe Dunlevy, which has offices throughout the state of Oklahoma. How long have you been there?
Since August of 2007.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now was your hiring a part of knowing 1804 was coming and realizing that businesses in the state of Oklahoma were probably going to need a little higher level of information than they had before on immigration issues?
Yes. As a matter of fact, prior to my joining Crowe Dunlevy, we didn't have an immigration practice necessarily. And realizing that the issue was not going away and it was actually just exploding across the country as well as in Oklahoma, we decided to start an immigration practice within the firm.
And because responsibilities were going to be placed on businesses and employers.
Correct.
Yeah.
Now, you went to school all over, but you're a native of Enid.
Yes, I am.
Well, so welcome home.
Thank you.
How long has it been since you've lived here in Oklahoma?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I just moved back about 2-3 years ago, and left after graduating from OSU. So it's been a while since I've been back.
What are just a couple of the major issues under 1804 that you're dealing with? For instance, the public benefits aspect of 1804. Right. What is that, and how why should we be concerned about it?
Well, the public benefits part is an interesting part of 1804 because, as some of you might be aware, public benefits, most of the public benefits in the United States and in Oklahoma, as a result of that, are federally funded means-tested benefits. That means that you have to meet a certain level below the poverty line in order to be eligible for it.
Like food stamps and the like?
Exactly, TANF, the various ones. Now, Bill 1804, House Bill 1804, actually requires that that be verified, that means-tested verification system be used for anyone 14 years of age or older. And what that means is that the means-tested portion of the test is given to anybody 14 or over to get benefits.
Does that mean, for instance, if you think you're eligible for food stamps and you apply, you are going to have to prove that you're a citizen of the state of Oklahoma?
Right.
Now, how does one prove that?
Right. Well, which, by the way, just so you know, for all means-tested benefits, you have to be eligible as either a U.S. citizen or a lawful permanent resident to receive those benefits as it is. Undocumented individuals don't get them. So it is a component of the bill that I'm not sure is critical in the...
Well, how does one prove that they're a citizen of the United States? You find a birth certificate, or is there more to it than that?
Yeah, there's more to it. It depends on whether you're what's called a born in the United States citizen, natural born citizen, which is one of the requirements for being a U.S. president, as you might know from the recent debates and conversations, or you can be what's called a naturalized citizen. I, for example, am a naturalized citizen. I came to the United States when I was about 9, I think, and after being here for a certain amount of years, officially after 5 years of being here as a lawful permanent resident, you can apply for citizenship. However, being 9, at 5 years, I would have only been 14, so I wasn't eligible to become a U.S. citizen. I became one under my parents. However, when I was 18, I was actually given a certificate of citizenship. Now, since that time, somebody like me has either acquired a U.S. passport, which would be only available to me if I was a U.S. citizen. So there's a couple of documentation documents that are available to most U.S. citizens and or lawful permanent residents.
Do we have any idea how many people that were receiving benefits are now no longer receiving benefits because of this requirement, and it has somehow identified people who probably shouldn't have been receiving these benefits to begin with?
I don't believe that it will identify those individuals because those individuals were never eligible for these benefits to begin with.
Well, then why do we have that in 1804? I know you're not supposed to be speaking for 1804, but
no.
Are you pointing out that
Yes.
this is not necessarily new, that we were always
Yes.
requiring that, even though
Yes.
it's in 1804, it was there anyway?
Right.
I see.
And one of the things is it does make you wonder at times why 1804 in the state of Oklahoma. In the state of Oklahoma, we have one of the smallest populations of immigrants, period, people like me, and then more so undocumented immigrants. It's one of the smallest populations. So the purpose for 1804 that was stated, I believe, in 2006 and 2007 was that, the effect of undocumented immigrants was really high on the taxpayers of Oklahoma. Well, this is an area where it doesn't really
So what you're saying
anything.
is if people had the perception that there were a lot of illegal aliens in Oklahoma receiving government benefits, you're saying that's probably not the case.
Exactly.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, even the most elaborate numbers that were used were not as high as what reality is in Oklahoma. Another area where 1804 requires under public benefits the verification of status is Medicaid. Once again, it's a means-tested benefit. Where it doesn't require it would be the emergency medical treatment for an individual,
Right.
which it still doesn't require it there. Do you see what I mean? So
I
those expenses will still be incurred.
If someone needs an ambulance, they're not going to require proof of citizenship before they
Correct.
before
Or
they
an
transport.
emergency room, yes.
Okay.
What about driver's licenses? Where are we on that under 1804, and where were we before?
Right. Now, before, we were able to provide identification and get driver's licenses. for driver's licenses, now from what I'm hearing from a lot of people that are affected by it, is that it is cumbersome. It is cumbersome in the sense that you actually have to go and show your proof of U.S. citizenship or lawful permanent residence. Now, an area where that becomes somewhat more cumbersome is in the area for refugees and asylees. I don't know if you're familiar with refugees and asylees, but these are individuals that for reasons of conditions in their country, whether it's a war or a natural disaster, they're no longer able to live in that country, and therefore we have welcomed them into the United States as refugees or asylees. They're given a documentation, an ID card, which doesn't have an expiration date on it. Because it doesn't have an expiration date on it, the Oklahoma Department of Transportation only issues them, via 1804, is only allowed to issue them a driver's license for 1 year. Now, for them to go and get another identification card to put the date on it costs them $340. So there are those kinds of steps that are taken that are somewhat cumbersome. And then, of course, there's the people who, how many people do we know that still have a copy of their birth certificate to show that they were born in the United States? How many elderly individuals actually have passports because they just don't see the need to travel abroad that much? My mom is a prime example. She's 82. She doesn't want to go traveling, getting on an airplane for more than 2 hours at any given time. So she's not going to go get a passport.
Okay.
Do you see?
Let's take a break here. We'll get back. We're discussing immigration, and we'll be right back. You're watching The Verdict.
Okiwani is an Indian name for a place where children play. When we obtained the camp, we found a lot of oil debris left in the woods. We saw a commercial about how the oil and natural gas industry cleans up old oil well sites. We called the OERB and they agreed to remove tons of concrete and steel. It didn't cost us a thing. Thousands of children have left their footprints on this land. Thanks to the oil and gas industry, they will for a long time to come.
Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate. We're accountants. We do taxes, business valuations, estate planning, and consulting. And we're right here in Oklahoma, working with the owners of small and medium-sized businesses. Steve Wilsey and Stuart Meyer have the resources and the experience. Wilsey, Meyer, Eatman, Tate in Oklahoma City and Tulsa.
We are back on The Verdict. Mick Cornett, Kent Myers, and our Jasmine is our guest, and we're discussing immigration. Kent, where to from here?
Well, one thing we hear a lot about in discussing 1804 is the effect it's going to have or is having on employers. How can you address that for us?
Well, under 1804, there are two different kinds of employers. There's the public employers, which are the public entities, like the state governments, the University of Oklahoma, OSU.
City of Oklahoma City?
City of Oklahoma City. For them, the employee verification component of the bill went into effect November 1st, 2007. And they are required to actually sign up with the E-Verify system, which is through DHS and Social Security Administration. It is, you have to do a memorandum of understanding and sign up with them, enroll with them, and you're able to verify the employee status of your employees.
But cutting to the chase on that, the city of Oklahoma City couldn't, under 1804, employ someone that is undocumented.
Correct, but it never could have.
Okay,
I think
so
we
that's
were,
not
we
a
were
difference.
already doing what
Yeah.
what the law now requires us to do.
So it
There
has
may have been other municipalities that were not in compliance, but we were already in compliance.
Because it has always been, under federal law, illegal or a violation to hire what's called an undocumented worker.
What about contractors who are working for a municipality? In other words,
Yeah.
we have bond issues, we put out a contract, someone responds. Is there any follow-up to see that those people?
Yes, and as starting July 1, 2008, which is this year, you all will be required to actually have a verification, some kind of documentation from your contractors or any private entity who wishes to contract with a public entity. Now, for private entities, there wasn't any mandatory requirement way to require them to use one of the 3 verification systems. So the bill actually has inserted in there a provision called the discrimination provision, which is that if an employer, a private employer that is, dismisses a U.S. citizen or lawful permanent resident employee within their charge and retains someone who may be a undocumented worker, they are liable for a discrimination lawsuit from that employee. Okay? The way around it, or the safe harbor for that, is provided if you are signed up for one of the 3 employee verification systems on the date of the dismissal and, as of July 1, 2008, you have a safe harbor from that discrimination.
Let me ask really kind of a too fundamental a question, I suspect. But let's say that I have a firm doing business in Oklahoma City. It doesn't matter what the type of firm it is. Prior to 1804, could I lawfully hire as an employee an undocumented person?
No, you've never been able to lawfully hire that.
So now,
individual.
after 1804, I still can't, but I have to perhaps, in order to avoid a discrimination claim, sign up for one of the 3 verifications. That's the only change for me as a private employer.
Correct.
Well, what about the legal challenges that are being made? We see that the different chambers of commerce are signed on to challenge on behalf of businesses around the state. What's that about, and how does that affect your corner of the world?
Okay. A lot of the legal challenges, as you might recall, last fall there was one by a group out of Washington, D.C. I believe it was a group of private citizens and how it affected them. That challenge was dismissed because the federal judge in that case felt that there wasn't enough standing for those individuals, especially since some of them were undocumented immigrants. The current challenge is from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, as well as a bunch of other employers, and they are challenging this verification component of the bills. They're challenging that private employers should not be required to do that. There isn't it doesn't have the authority to do that. They're challenging the piece where individual independent contractors have to provide documentation of their employment eligibility to whomever they're contracting with. Otherwise, the highest rate of state income tax will be withheld from them by the contracting entity. So there are pieces that are being challenged. We don't know yet. It's a very new claim that has been filed, and so it will be interesting to see how that plays out. But as you might be aware, around the country, there are a number of various local and or state level legislation regarding immigration issues, varying from all degrees of immigration, whether it's to public benefits or employment. And they're being challenged at a different rate.
And sometimes you hear people just questioning the constitutionality in general, saying that this is a federal issue and states should stay out of it. Is that going to be addressed? Is there a chance that the federal government would say that all of these state laws are just null and void and we're going to handle it at the federal level?
Yeah, one of the, I think, greatest tactics, if people really, really wanted to do something about immigration issues and the number of undocumented individuals in the United States and in Oklahoma, would be, I believe, instead of introducing all these different little bitty bills all over the country, and even in Oklahoma, I think just in the last 2-3 weeks, a number of bills have been introduced regarding immigration would be actually if the state legislatures could interact with their federal counterparts and actually work together on trying to get something through. But I don't know if that's going to be possible in 2008.
In other words, all these state legislators perhaps should use their energies and their weight to encourage Congress. And I think there's just a frustration with a lot of people around the country, though, that Congress is not going to act anytime soon.
Right.
And so states are, if states really want this to change, they're going to have to do it on their own. So how's that going to play out?
Well, I don't think they can do it on their own because of the whole preemption component of this. Because, you know, a lot of the lawsuits do state that it is preempted, these laws are preempted from by the U.S. Constitution and by IRCA, the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986. So, forgive me, but those types of things are going to pop up all the time. So it's really an issue that didn't happen overnight. The issue of undocumented immigrants didn't happen overnight. It happened over the course of the last 21 years, because in 1986, when we passed IRCA and we did what was called, at that time, the amnesty bill, we noted at that time that we needed close to 400,000 to 500,000 low-skilled laborers in the United States to maintain our current economic cycles, and that was 400 to 500 foreign-born workers, not just U.S.-born workers. That was on top of the U.S.-born workers. And when you take that number and you times it by even 20 years, what you get is 8 to 10 million. And when you ask yourself, what is the number of undocumented workers in the United States at this time, you get anywhere from 7 to 11 to 12 million. Well, that number is right there in the middle. It didn't happen overnight.
Well, we're going to have to call this show to a conclusion, but thanks very much for coming on The Verdict and shedding a lot of light on what's been not only a controversial, but a very complicated issue. And I know Kent and I appreciate you coming by and helping to clear it up.
Okay, thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
Kent and I'll have a final word right after this.
The good life comes naturally to Tulsa, where nature's beauty is matched with an eye for aesthetics. A legacy of neighborhoods graced with lawns and landscaping and handsome homes. A place that seems to have patented an ideal lifestyle. Bank First is loyal to the quality of life Tulsa assures its citizens, to the priority placed on education, culture, and growth. Loyal to builders who transform raw land into residential charm. Developers who see opportunity and add vitality to Tulsa's economy. Bank First serves both enterprise and private lives that need a loyal partner. It's how we help nurture this city's very good life. Bank First. Loyal to Oklahoma. Loyal to you.
The Journal-Record is pleased to be a sponsor of The Verdict. The Journal-Record, since 1903, the best source of Oklahoma business news and legal information.
We are wrapping up a show on immigration and discussing House Bill 1804, and this is an election year, and there's people that want to tweak 1804. Certainly the business communities from around the state would like to see some changes, and then we're always going to be debating what are the social aspects, what has changed in this very controversial issue. And I suppose if you look at 2008 and the election year coming, probably as controversial an issue as any of the legislators will face as they go back in toward a re-election.
Indeed, and of course federally it's a huge issue. Locally, one kind of wonders, since Oklahoma doesn't have particularly porous borders, one kind of wonders why Oklahoma's gotten as far out in front as it has. But we appreciate very much Jasmine Majid joining us.
And we'll be back next week with another show. See you then.
The preceding program was produced exclusively for the Cox Channel.